Movement at the core is about connecting to your body in gravity. It's how we stand. It is about every step that we take and its awareness, its a presence. It's being conscious and connected to our physical body because at the end of the day, if we were not moving, we are not living. Like movement is part of life, right?
Right.
And then our feet are a very, very important part of that because the only contact point between the body and the ground are our feet.
Yeah.
So the story of foot ground control, the absorption of energy, the balance and stabilization, all of that is coming from your foot function, your foot awareness. And yes, every foot movement affects your knees, your hips, your lower back, up the skeleton to your shoulder, all the way through your neck. So it's really, really powerful and influential. My passion within this movement story is sensory stimulation and sensory science. That's the neuroscience component of it.
Welcome to MyMD Unscripted, where healthcare gets personal and the script gets tossed. I'm Dr. Clint Carter, ER doctor turned direct primary care freedom fighter, on a mission to challenge how our healthcare system treats patients in America. In every episode, my expert guests and I dive into real conversations about what's broken and how we can fix it by making healthcare about people, not just managing disease. It's time to rethink what healthcare should be and how we can make it better together. Welcome to the podcast. Hey guys, and welcome back to the MyMD Unscripted podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Clint Carter, and today we are blessed to be joined by someone who understands feet and movement in ways that I absolutely don't. And so I cannot wait to introduce you guys to Dr. Emily Splichal, is a functional and regenerative podiatrist, a human movement specialist, and the founder of Noboso. With more than 20 years of experience, she integrates barefoot science, fascial dynamics, and neuroscience to reframe how we think about movement, longevity, and performance. She's the author of Barefoot Strong and Sensory Sapiens, and is known globally for teaching that the foot is not just a structure, but the sensory gateway to the whole body. Dr. Emily, thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself and how we got here and what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. So, podiatrist. So, I treat feet. However, I treat from a very unique perspective. I am a functional and regenerative podiatrist, formerly trained as a surgeon, did surgery for 5 years out of residency, and then put the scalpel down for the last time in 2017. And I founded the Center for Functional and Regenerative Podiatry. And what that means is I look at the body from a very integrated perspective. I appreciate functional movement, so the basics and the dynamics of bipedalism or walking. It's a big part of my practice. But I also factor in things like diet and sleep and stress. I'm very much into supplementation and alternative modalities such as red light and PEMF, etc. And then on the regenerative podiatry side, I do a lot of biologics and peptides, and I treat a lot of chronic tissue injury. And I try to play the role of the provider who is one, thinking outside of the box, not doing the very stereotypical orthotics, supportive shoes, physical therapy, or just live with it. It's probably a lot of what traditional podiatry is about. But I also try to give options that are before surgery. So not everything has to go towards a surgical correction. There's a
Right.
lot within the regenerative space that can help tissue injuries that used to have to go to surgery and now no longer need to.
Awesome. So used to do surgery in the system, classic podiatry, and then moved into the functional space, doing so much more with prevention and movement, and really how it looks like we're going to get into how your foot and feet health really affects the entire body and vice versa. That's why, you talk about sleep and diet and all those things as well. You're treating a whole person who happens to have feet. So, one thing that, part of my story is being a, residency trained family medicine guy, and, getting out looked, regular clinic jobs looked awful. So I went to the ER because why not? And then that was fun until it wasn't. And then so by the grace of God, we started this practice, and I just like, man, I've got nothing but time now with my patients, an hour-long visit. I should be able to fix everybody. And, I had such a large population of people that I couldn't really make I could get to a point, I just couldn't get beyond that because I was just dealing with classic in the box, residency trained tools, one of which was not movement, right? Diet and exercise are more like a punchline in most of my training because no one really changes and all those things. And so one of the things that I do have a subset of patients that their movement's limited because of their foot health, and pain and all those other things, as well as those same patients usually are dealing with back and some other things as well, but oftentimes it's just the feet. How come, if movement's one of the most powerful forms of medicine, how come we're not prescribing it like it's important, in the system, you know?
I do agree. I think it is highly, highly underappreciated. I do a lot of work in the longevity space. And ironically, even in the longevity space, no one is talking about movement.
Yeah.
Movement and this is movement beyond just we are recommended to take 10,000 steps a day
Yeah.
or 5,000 steps a
Yes.
day, or elevate your heart rate for at least 30 minutes, twice a week. We have these kind of rough governmental based standards of exercise that are given, which is really not the full story.
Yeah.
Almost like nutritionally, it's not the full story. Movement at the core is about connecting to your body in gravity. It's how we stand. It is about every step that we take and its awareness, its a presence. It's being conscious and connected to our physical body because at the end of the day, if we were not moving, we are not living. Like movement is part of life, right?
Right.
And then our feet are a very, very important part of that because the only contact point between the body and the ground are our feet.
Yeah.
So the story of foot ground control, the absorption of energy, the balance and stabilization, all of that is coming from your foot function, your foot awareness. And yes, every foot movement affects your knees, your hips, your lower back, up the skeleton to your shoulder, all the way through your neck. So it's really, really powerful and influential. My passion within this movement story is sensory stimulation and sensory science. That's the neuroscience component of it, and connecting to our fascia. And that's really highly misunderstood in the medical community from a traditional perspective, is just what is even fascial tissue? How does fascia hold on to emotions? How does fascia connect with your body in a very rapid way to trigger stabilization patterns? None of that is really described. I didn't learn any of this in podiatry school, mind
No,
you.
I didn't learn any of that in medical school. Fascia becomes a thing in your feet when you get plantar fasciitis. That's the
Yes.
first time and last time that pretty much any of us think about our fascia.
Yeah.
So, I guess for our listeners, back up a slight bit. What is fascia then, and why should anybody care?
Yeah. So your fascia is a connective tissue web that wraps around every single aspect of your body. A lot of people will think of it around muscles. So it is. It's this saran wrap that surrounds your muscle group and then the muscle itself, and then every fiber and fascicle. So as the muscle keeps breaking down smaller and smaller to its elements, it's still wrapped in this saran wrap, this fascia. And then that fascia becomes the tendons, the ligaments. It actually becomes the joint capsule. It becomes the periosteum, which is a saran wrap on the bone. It becomes the surrounding of your blood vessels. It becomes the surrounding into your nerves. It is continuous with your gut. Essentially, it's a very, very powerful continuous web that is packed with nerves. There's 100 million sensory nerves in your myofascial web. So to me, I consider this saran wrap, this continuous web, as an extension of your brain. And it is continuously reading your body, the environment, every shift, every communication with the ground and with gravity to tell you how to stabilize. But it also houses a lot of interoceptors. And interoceptors are special nerve endings that are often associated with your autonomic nervous system. This is your fight or flight restoration response system. It is how people perceive, am I safe? This is very simplifying this, but am I safe? Am I calm? Am I regulated? Do I feel my body? So a lot of your fascial system is connected to perception of self. And
Hmm.
when you feel yourself, right, you feel your body, you actually feel calmer. This could be anxiety, depression, PTSD, children on the spectrum, autism. All of that stuff is really a story of sensory and perception of self, which is a story of fascia. So very, very,
Oh,
very integrated and powerful. I think my passion is very much on the side of the emotional complexity of human beings. And a lot of that is because I specialize in chronic patients. And I started seeing this in my practice in New York City that a lot of the chronic nerve pain, idiopathic neuropathies. If you've ever treated a patient with idiopathic neuropathy, there's a lot of emotional complexity behind it because to them, they didn't do anything and they have this chronic nerve pain in their
yeah.
feet. And one day it's fine, then it's not, then that sock works and that shoe works. And it's highly, highly frustrating for these patients. So I started to just see in these chronic patients that there was this emotional layer that I could not help them get better until we addressed the emotional complexity behind it. And our emotional state oftentimes makes things worse. Think of any chronic neurological condition or
Right.
spasticity, like a dystonia. If I start to get like worked up, I'm anxious about whatever it is, it can throw spasticity into a muscle
Yeah.
very, very quickly. And that would be
Yeah.
like a dystonia or any of your complex regional pain syndrome. Now they start to get the skin is turning white and purple, and they're just like, I don't even know what's happening. And their body is responding. So the mind and emotions is very powerful. And that is part of this fascial story.
Dude, that is insane. So what you just said is kind of insane. And I don't know that the listeners really gonna catch how insane that is because in my 20, I don't want to get into it, 25 plus years of being a doctor, never once considered the fascia at all in any of that other than wrapped around different parts of your body, muscle groups. The fact that it's one continuous web never, you know, entered my mind. The fact that it's got all of these nerves for proprioception and affecting the muscles and the blood vessels and the gut and all the things that are going on at the same time, sympathetic, parasympathetic.
Yep.
The fact that it has anything to do with your emotions is crazy. And it's not that far of a leap of understanding. It's just not once was it presented at all sort of like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think the part, if I could change traditional med school, it would be this element of, okay, everyone, at the end of the day, you're treating humans, and humans are very complex. And we have this consciousness, and there's layers of awareness and perception and trauma, and like just a different, just that element to it, right? And I
Right.
get it. I get when you're like, code blue, right? Like in the ED where you're just like, okay,
Yeah.
this patient is like dying, right? You have to become mechanical, but then under that there is this thread of we are souls. You're a soul at the end of the day, right? How do we treat that? And I just think that's why I take a unique approach to medicine. And I'm blessed that it was my chronic patients that led me to
Yeah.
this and to explore it, and now that's completely shaped my practice. I remember when I would do surgery, and this one time I refused. I was in the OR, about to go in the OR, and the patient was just like, I don't know, like, Dr. Splichal, are you sure you're good with this? You sure you're competent?" And I was like, you know what? I don't want that energy. You've just completely shifted, and now you put these things in the universe of, and I refused to do surgery because that is really important. I tell my patients now, I don't do surgery anymore, but I will say when you go in, you need to put all your faith in that doctor, right? Like, I trust
Yeah.
you. I am here. There's a circle of trust and competency, and I believe in you, and just kind of that energy, which it might sound a little woo woo, but it's really important.
No, I totally get. Now that I
Mhm.
have seen and I know that to be true for sure.
Yep.
You get into a patient that's backing out is strong, but even just having those second thoughts and those doubts and just the bigness of the moment or whatever's going on, and they feel out of control,
Yep.
outcomes are worse, right? It's
Yep.
worth taking a breath, if you don't want to put the other patient in front of them and let them, let's circle back and talk. As our patients advocate, as we help our patients navigate the medical world outside of our office because we can only reach so far. Well, one of our big parts is sending them to specialists that we trust and giving them
Mhm.
confidence in the people that
Yep.
they're seeing and letting them know that for sure their specialist is going to be expecting a phone call from me to see how it went, and
Yep.
all of the just the confidence that getting to that point was the right. We've there's lots of reasons why that's the right moment, the right move at that moment, and that was the right specialist and all those things. I do procedures in the office and none of them are all that scary. But for sure the confidence that you're doing the right thing plays significantly in your outcomes, which also I guess I've never given thought to the fact it's kind of a woo-woo thing to think, but it's for real.
Or you could go into, well, okay, well, if you are now stimulating the autonomic nervous
Yep.
system into a fight or flight, now I'm going to vasoconstrict. Now you're right. So you could take it literally into a Western medicine
Yeah.
approach on what's happening with the autonomic nervous
You
system.
could.
I do still think it is, um, powerful psychosomatic and the biopsychosocial side of
Yeah.
medicine. It's really important.
And if your patient's a believer, the supplements work better, the medicines work better, the
Yeah,
surgeries
totally.
turn out better. And if your
Absolutely.
patient's a skeptic, well, everyone should be a little skeptical. But if your patient's sort of like, nothing works on me, nothing works on me, nothing works on me, it's like, and nothing's going to. I can make little changes, but there's a limit to how far we can go with people who nothing ever works on. Which is a bummer, and it makes it sound like medicine's not real, but it's we're dealing with, like you said, dynamic, complex,
Hmm.
emotional, spiritual, mental, and physical beings.
Yep.
Physical part's only like, a fourth or a fifth of what's really going on in this whole situation. So,
Yep.
yeah, absolutely. And the fact that feet and fascia play such a large part in this, I had never given it any thought. So tell me more about how podiatry specially sets you up for taking care of the whole patient the way you're taking care of the whole patient, even just in general. Because you started out fixing feet and now you're helping fix people through
Hmm.
their feet, maybe as that entry point
Yep.
into the process.
Yep, and that's a great way to look at it. Is so I think my passion very early on through the podiatry school and then residency into how I was early practicing privately was that I always thought that I was treating movement. And that
Yeah.
yes, feet are part of it, but it was about movement. And then what's actually interesting, which does make my background a little bit unique, is that during my first year of residency, I actually left. I stopped. I won't say the word quit, but I stepped away.
Took a break.
I stepped away from residency and I went back to school and I got my master's in human movement. And I did this during 2008, 9, 10, like 9, 10 during the barefoot running boom. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of research being done around minimal feet, barefoot science, sensory science, surface science, kind of that whole side. And that really, I'm so glad that I did that because I focused for 2 years about all of this stuff on barefoot science. Then I got into the fascia. Then I started getting into the pelvic floor. Then I got into how we breathe, the diaphragm, up the neck to the tongue. So all these different fascial ways. So that when I went back to traditional podiatry, I had this unique perspective of the connection, and that's where it became sensory and fascial. So
Yeah.
from day one, I would speak to people about the pelvic floor and about the way that they breathe from a stabilization perspective. And what's really unique is that our feet fascially, through fascial lines demonstrated in cadaver labs, our feet connect to our pelvic floor, to our diaphragm, up our neck, to our tongue. So I will teach people how we stabilize in gravity is actually fascially toe to tongue. And I will teach people how to activate that. Or you could say foot to core, and I teach people how to get their toes and their pelvic floor to coordinate. And then the same thing with the diaphragm. That's a big part of my practice. And that's what most people know me for is for this foot to core, toe to tongue system,
Wow.
and it's built in our fascia, it's built within our nervous system. There's actually a muscle synergy that is demonstrated in the brain that when you light up the extensor hallucis longus, which is the muscle that, oh, sorry, the flexor hallucis longus that pulls the toe down, you will activate the levator ani muscle, which is the posterior pelvic floor, and it stabilizes the pelvis for your glutes to contract. That makes sense when you understand how we walk and bipedalism. And when you're about to push off your big toe, you need your pelvis stable because that's when the glutes activate. So to me, things like that are completely fascinating. So the foot is never treated in isolation. It is always
Right.
thought from a movement or treated from a movement lens. My movement lens is fascial and sensory. And then, of course, biomechanics, because your skeleton needs to move and joints move. But it is really the fascia and the sensory stimulation that is driving us during movement.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. At first I was trying to make the leap from toe to core to pelvic core. But that makes sense because we're walkers, we're bipeds. So
Yeah.
as you push all the muscles that make out the gait, which doesn't stop at the pelvis technically, right? They
Right.
all have to kind of sync up, and then whether it's in the cerebellum or another part of the brain, and
Mhm.
that that does make sense. And then your reflexes, so many of your reflexes, by definition, a reflex doesn't get to the brain, right?
Mhm.
It bounces right back up off the spine and comes right back down,
Mhm.
probably through the fascia to cause that movement. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's crazy. So we're talking stability, performance, but pain modulation. We work in these regional pain syndromes where
Mhm.
everything everything in that leg is angry and hurting or whatever. And you're like, it's not following a specific pinched nerve pattern. It's this syndrome. For the record, for those listening, you never want to be diagnosed with a syndrome because that means we don't really understand why all the things go
Right.
together the way they do. But we've seen it before and we'll see it again. So now you have a syndrome. Yeah. What do you think about how that all sort of fits together?
Yeah, I mean, so one, there are a lot of things that I treat that fall under these fascial integrations and stabilizations and patterns of transfer stress. So let's say I just saw a patient a couple days ago for hip pain. And he was like, "Well, I had an x-ray. They said I have some arthritis." My wife is like, "Get a hip replacement." And he goes, "So I went and had the x-ray and they're like, I guess there's some arthritis." So then they're
Yeah.
like, "I don't know, go to physical therapy." Right? This is kind of a typical
Yep.
story.
Yep.
But we think if it hurts in the buttocks area that it's the hip joint and therefore maybe I need a replacement. Right? That's a very little translation of this where then it was actually in the region of the sciatic nerve. And he happened to have a history of sciatica in the past, but he's like, well, it's not like burning and running down. This is very typical sciatica or like a radiculopathy that is showing up in the foot. So I started to explain to him that there could be like sciatica like things where if your hip joint is not stable, if the femur in the socket is not stable, what your nervous system does myofascially is it's going to contract and lock it down.
Yeah.
Because if something isn't stable, it wants to take away the motion, right? So doing that, well, now you have these deep, deep muscles that are wrapping around the joint capsule, fascia, 100 million nerves. And guess what? Those deep rotators connect into your pelvic floor and then run down fascially to your foot. So you can absolutely have this. So it was kind of radiating where he was like, oh, it kind of reminds me of like the extension of sciatica, but it's still like here, here. To me, that is a fascial syndrome, called a syndrome
Yeah.
if you want, right? Because it's
Yeah.
not I couldn't do an MRI and it's gonna be like,
Right.
"Light up!" Right there, right? If I poke there. And he would say, "Well, it doesn't hurt when I'm sitting here, right? But as soon as I'm moving, then I get it," right? So to me, that's a
Yeah.
stabilization story, that's a gravity story, that's a sensory story, that's about this relationship of complex integrated stabilization with every foot strike. So it becomes essentially a thing. So, I told him, no, you don't need a hip replacement. What we need to do is focused fascial mobilization and understand how you stabilize in your foot, how you stabilize in your pelvis, even something like your inability to rotate your T spine or your rib cage can cause your hip to lock down. So it's always appreciating it's an integrated system. And I help patients understand that one of the biggest contributors to a lot of our musculoskeletal stress is walking. And it is the thing that we do when we think we never think it's the thing that is causing our symptoms. But a lot of people walk non optimally and in a compensated way,
Right.
that they are walking with short little steps. They are not swinging their arms. Or I used to do this in New York City. I would have a 30-pound purse on one side
Yeah.
and I would like this, and I would be swinging one arm. That's causing total stress on the system. And it is what keeps contributing. And then you just have this feed forward response in the system, and we never get out of it. And all we're doing is go get a massage. Think of like the boat where the cartoon, and then they put a thing on the water that's spouting out, and then it pops up somewhere else, and then they
Yeah.
cover that hole, and then it pops up. To me, that's what I feel a lot of people do muscularly, skeletally,
Yeah.
because they don't understand the system as an integrated unit. And the start of that story is feet and fascial. If you don't appreciate those two, then you're going to keep covering the holes and things are popping up in other places.
What do you think about Rosti as a short-term physical therapy alternative for some folks that have musculoskeletal pain? Their whole thing is they're fascia manipulators, right? They're get their magic thumbs and they dig into that tight fascia plane, and they just tell you to breathe instead of cry while they go down, and it's supposed to hurt so good sometimes it just hurts. But
Yeah, yeah. You said Rolfing?
a Rosti, so it is like it's a subset of usually chiropractors, sometimes physical therapists that go to a special class, special training, not a class, like a whole set of training. I think it's AIROSTI. But anyway, we have one in our town, and it works to help release some of the fascia tension in that
Mhm.
area. It's not getting to the underlying whatever you were doing wrong mechanically, sort of
Right.
biomechanically, but it's a we've had so many patients that in the right subset of patients, it allows that fascia to relax and that muscle to breathe and for that joint to get less tight and that kind of stuff. So that's something that's super interesting. And I think I understand why it works. A lot of times it just does, to me, it doesn't make sense that it works so well on some of these patients. I mean, I guess you were a little tight, but whatever. But because the fascia is so involved in pain, I wonder if that has a lot to do with it.
Yes. So without going directly into that technique, I'm gonna say, let's say it's similar to Rolfing,
Okay.
which is, if you're familiar with the Rolfing or listeners are, it is a 10 sequence thing where they stay on one muscle in each of us. So they'll do your calf for an hour
Oh,
and
wow.
there's no like lotion. It is a very aggressive. So it sounds very, very
That might be
similar.
similar. Yeah.
Very similar. There is structural integration, which is kind of an extension off of it. So yeah, let's call it manual
Yeah.
body, manual
Yep. Yep.
tissue. So that is very important in getting very localized
Right.
into tissue adhesions and stickiness, right? Where we just need to get some hydration and get those fascial fibers moving on each other, because oftentimes you can get fascial stickiness, connective tissue stickiness, and it sticks the nerve down, and then the
Mm,
nerve is stuck, and you get a kind of like a pseudo entrapment of the
right.
nerve, and we need these nerves to slide and glide. So that's where you could do it. This gentleman that I had said the example of like his
Yeah.
hip,
Yeah.
I gave him his at home mobilization program that he has to do every single day.
Yeah.
And I said, in addition, you can go to a structural integration or someone who's going to do the deep body work to your deep rotators, your obturator internus, like into the capsule. just to like get this thing moving faster. But he still needs to do the work at home
Yeah. Right.
because um, you can no one is a magic hands where you go once or twice a week and that's it. Like, I don't
Right.
believe in physical therapy in that
Yeah.
same sense. You have to be doing work continuously. And what I
Yeah.
told him is, remember, we are addressing the nervous system. Your nervous system is kind of like a computer. You have to keep reminding it and reinforcing it. And we're going to turn off something, but you got to turn something else on. So it's like circuit breakers. Turn off that circuit, bring this one back on. And you have to do that multiple times for your nervous system to, okay, yes, yes, I remember, and then it holds on to the pattern. So that's really when you look at movement compensations, movement disorders, things like that, is it's a nervous system response and you're training the nervous system. So if someone has body work and they loosen up the hip, as soon as that body worker is done, you have to do some diaphragmatic breathing and like wake up your pelvic floor. Or you're going to stand up in gravity and you're going to start moving around. And guess what happens? Your
Yeah.
body is going to lock right back up
Yeah.
to where you started because it doesn't feel safe or stable. So you have to follow every mobilization with a stabilization technique. And your diaphragm is one of the best ways to do that. And your
That
tongue.
And then the Erasti folks, they definitely send you home with nerve glide exercises or
Yep.
some of the other
Good.
mobilization. Hopefully, some of the opposite movements of what got you into your spot or whatever
Mhm.
that they decide is right for you at that time. But I do agree. I would never have thought diaphragm when
Mhm.
talking about hip pain, right? Like this, the fact that that's all connected is still rocking my mind a little bit. Um,
Yes.
well, so what so we've got folks listening, so that means that we have people that hurt because like everybody hurts I think sometimes, working in the ER, my wife worked cardiology during those years before I stole her into this practice. And sometimes she
Mhm.
would just come home and be like, I don't want to get old. They all hurt all the time. And
Mhm.
I would just come home from a bad ER shift and be like driving in the car, like, I literally don't hurt at all right now. I should probably like soak up this moment
Mhm.
because based on what I see in humanity, everybody hurts. And the fact that we sit in front of TVs and in front of steering wheels, in front of computers and stuff, as it probably has a large part of it. But so
Yeah.
we've got listeners that hurt. What are some actionable things that you would say, hey, listen, I don't know what you got, but this fascia reaches from toes to nose. So,
Mhm.
what are some actionable things that are fairly universal that you would have people start doing to start trying to get some movement away from pain in some of these sort of like more generalized pains?
Yeah. So I would say first one, feet. So releasing your feet by standing on a golf ball, lacrosse ball, neural ball,
Oh,
tennis
wow.
ball, whatever it is. Release your feet. If you release your feet, this would be a massage or something like that. This is you standing and doing something to your feet, just a couple minutes. I tell people to do this when you brush your teeth. So every morning, every evening, when you brush your teeth, bring some sort of fascial stimulation massage to the bottom of your feet. Now, why it's so important is a lot of these fascial lines. So, a fascial line is a continuous line of muscles that are continuous to fascia. So there's a lateral line, there's a posterior line, there's front lines, there's functional lines. There's a lot of lines in the body. A lot of them cross the bottom of the foot. So by releasing, massaging, use the word you want, the bottom of your feet, you will feel my back loosened up. How is that possible? Oh, my hip doesn't feel as tight. Oh, my knee, my IT band. All of these things are loosening up because they all cross the bottom of the foot. So that is one of the easiest ways. I tell people again every morning, evening, when you brush your teeth, release your feet. So leave the ball, leave the tool, use the neural ball, whatever it is, in front of your bathroom sink and do not move it. Just wake up before you go to bed, brush your teeth, release your feet. That's the number one thing. Two, what I find most people are not talking about, I know we mentioned it already, is the diaphragm. Most people are not breathing and stabilizing their canister, the right way. Now, breathing is a whole other thing where you can get into sleep apnea. And are you a mouth breather? There's a lot of stuff here that is really, really important. But if we just keep it centered around the diaphragm and making sure that you are doing deep belly Buddha breathing, so sub diaphragmatic breathing through the nose, you want to, is going to start to coordinate the way your pelvic floor and your diaphragm sync. So they move like this. So they go
Okay.
up and down. So every time you take a deep inhale through your nose, your diaphragm drops. Every time you exhale, your diaphragm lifts. And we want to really have good mobility of the diaphragm. The way we stand affects this rhythm of the diaphragm. And actually, a lot of people have diaphragms that are stuck. So they have adhesions, so trigger points under the diaphragm because they are standing maybe tucked like this, right?
Yeah.
So if I have a kyphotic spine and I'm standing like this, I just limited my diaphragm range of motion. So I'm bringing in 30% of the lung capacity that I need, right? We know that. You know that. That's your forte of what you're looking at the way people are breathing as they go into the emergency room. A lot of that has to do with the way that they're sitting and standing. Could be the other posture where they're in kind of a rib flare. So they're extended this way. That also throws off the diaphragm capacity to find a rhythm with your pelvic floor. So that by finding a stacked rib cage pelvis and taking deep diaphragmatic breath will help stabilize the pelvis, your low back pain, your hip pain, your knee pain, your plantar fasciitis, your Achilles issue, right? All of that starts to affect that. So release your feet every day, morning, evening. Two would be finding deep diaphragmatic breath work. The diaphragmatic breath work, if you extend your exhale like 10 seconds, end range expiration, you will inherently be activating your pelvic floor muscles. Your pelvic floor, man, woman, doesn't matter. You have to be able to lift it and relax it, lift it and relax it. That is how it finds its rhythm in gravity. That when you do an end range expiration, you are inherently strengthening your pelvic floor without me even having to cue you how to activate your pelvic floor. Cause that's a whole other conversation where people are like, I don't know what to do. Like, what is that? Where's my pelvic floor? Really important. And again, yes, for women, also for men, but really, really important if we want to kind of think of people in pain is postmenopausal women.
Yeah.
You have to strengthen your pelvic floor. This has nothing to do with sexual function. This has to do with decreasing estrogen changes your connective tissue. Your
Yep.
connective tissue inherently becomes lax or less strong. And this is where you get pelvic floor prolapses and you can get organ prolapse because your pelvic floor has a very, very high connective tissue concentration.
Mm.
And that's where you actually start to do it. Same thing in your foot. Arches will fall postmenopausal in women because there's over 100 ligaments in the foot that start to lose its strength and integrity as the estrogen goes down. And when your feet fall, guess what happens? So does your pelvis. And then this whole thing that we've been talking about happens.
Wow, that pelvic part is super cool. We have a device at our office called the Imsella. Sends a
Mhm.
magnetic wave through there, strengthens the pelvic floor. It's
Yep.
not the answer, obviously, to all menopausal women, but it's a great way to strengthen that floor, and which is a hard, like you said, it's really hard for people to find and strengthen. And then we're heavy into hormone replacement for longevity. Um,
Yep.
trying to fight those losses of testosterone in men and women, estrogen in women especially. And I had never thought of a falling foot, and I had no idea it had that much to do with the pelvic floor, although
Mhm.
other parts of the pelvis, yes. So I mean, it all ties together so well for, quality of life now and later. And like you said, your fascia being toe to nose, being part of the pain, part of not being in pain, part of feeling well, it's part of your
Yep.
wellness. All those hundreds of thousands of nerves or however many you just said it was in the
100 million, 100 million
100
there, even more.
billion. Dang,
Yes.
nerve endings. That's crazy.
Yes.
So, I love that. And then when I, movement being more than exercise, but including exercise as we close, do you have like an easy do and don't when it comes to movement on exercise on the exercise front?
Yes. So, what I will say on the exercise front that kind of follows the thread of everything that we were speaking of is to truly be present when you are exercising, whether it is you taking a class or you working out on your own, you're doing cardio or you are doing the weights, whatever combination you're doing, is to actually be truly, truly present. Let's give a quick example of, let's say you're doing a bicep curl. Instead of just kinda, "Oh, what do I like, what do I have to do? What am I gonna cook for dinner?" Like, people just like, "Oh, I gotta check the exercise box," right? But to be really, really present, and as you do it, can you feel the exhalation of the breath? Can you feel the contraction of your muscles? And technically, you're not feeling your muscles, you're feeling your fascia, because you have 10 times as many nerve endings in the fascia that wraps around the muscle than the actual
Yeah.
muscle itself. So when you do a bicep curl, you're feeling the fascia, but can you feel the strength, right? Can you just be present in what it is? Feel the weight of the dumbbell in your hands, right? And I'm also in my own little kind of soapbox mission that we are a highly disassociated, disconnected society, and all of the technology and everything that we're doing actually
Yeah.
disconnects us from ourselves. Exercise and movement and being present and really feeling the efforts of the exercise actually has a much, much, much more powerful effect on your state and the benefits. So that's what I would say, is to try to be really present and to feel it. Here's a
That's
fun challenge. Can you shut your eyes sometimes when you do it? And then that helps you. Don't fall. Don't fall when doing it. But if you shut your
yeah.
eyes and you actually really feel the contraction, like when I do pull ups, I'll actually shut my eyes because I want to just really feel my body contracting as I do a pull up. I love doing yoga with my eyes shut. Like if you're in down dog and the chaturangas and you feel safe on the ground doing it, what happens if you shut your eyes as you're flowing through yoga? Can you feel the body even more? And as we get older, I want people to feel the strength. I want you to be like, my body is holding myself up. I feel strong, right? Like, yes, Jane, you are strong, right? Like my body is serving me, right? It seems that, again, I go a little woo-woo on the side, but it's important. I want people to trust their body and to
Yeah.
trust their body physically and musculoskeletally. You have to trust your body and that it is there to help you move the best way. And it's critical for longevity.
And I too like to close my eyes when I do pull-ups, but it's mostly because I don't want to see my body struggling to get up to that dang bar again. My legs start kicking at some point, it's a pull-up.
Right, right.
But and I also agree that we're a disconnected society. So as soon as we sign off here, you guys quit listening to podcasts and go talk to a friend and make a connection. But Dr. Emily, thank you so much for being here. This was super informative. It all makes perfect sense. It's going to change the way that I practice, on the day to day. I really appreciate it.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right. Bye bye.
Thanks for joining me today on MyMD Unscripted. I hope today's conversation opened your mind and inspired you to imagine a better path for your health and therefore life. If you found value in this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone passionate about transforming healthcare. Real change starts with real conversations, so let's keep them going. Until next time, stay well, stay curious, and never stop pushing for better.